I never thought the smell of roasted chilies would take me back quite like this. It's funny, isn't it? Just the other day, I was in the kitchen, not doing anything special, just boiling a pot of beans, and this little puff of spice came floating through the air, warm and smoky. And just like that, whoosh, I was 5 years old again, sitting in the back seat of my daddy's Buick, my face pressed up against the window, watching the dust dance in the air as we rolled across the border into Tijuana. Land sakes alive, it's been 70-some years now? And still, that one smell, just that, can open up a whole world inside me. I don't talk about that trip much. I suppose there's parts of it I tried to forget, or maybe just folded away like you do an old quilt, neatly, gently, tucked at the bottom of the chest. That lately, I don't know. Maybe it's my age, maybe it's the quiet that settles in when the grandbabies aren't around, but it's been on my mind something fierce. That summer, that trip, the sunburn on my nose, the cotton dress Mama made by hand, the way Daddy whistled that same tune over and over, and that one afternoon that near scared the life out of me. Mercy, I didn't know then that something so small, a simple walk through a busy market, could stay with you all your life. But it did. I remember my brother Billy poking me in the ribs, like he always did, and my big sister Lorraine rolling her eyes like I was just a little nuisance. I suppose I was. Always asking questions, always wandering off. Daddy used to say I had feet like feathers and a head full of clouds. He wasn't wrong. That day, well, I'll tell you what, it started like any other. Sun high in the sky, Mama dabbing sweat from her neck with a handkerchief, Daddy tapping the steering wheel like he was drumming for a band. But by the time the sun set, I wasn't the same little girl anymore. I guess what I'm trying to say is, some memories, they don't knock on the door polite like. No ma'am, they barge in like old friends you never expected to see again. And this story I'm about to tell you, well, I've kept it mostly to myself all these years. Not because it was too painful. No, not exactly. More like, I just didn't think anyone would understand. You young folks wouldn't know what it was like back then. Things were different. Simpler in some ways, sure. But scarier, too. Especially for a little girl who didn't yet know the world could have sharp edges. Now, I'm not saying it was a tragedy, and I'm not saying I was some hero. Lord have mercy, I was just a baby, really. But there was a moment, just a blink in time, when I thought I'd never see my mama again. And honey, let me tell you, that kind of fear, it don't go easy. It sticks to you like the dust on a dirt road. And maybe that's why I've been thinking about it more and more lately. Maybe it's time I let it out. Let it breathe a little. So, if you don't mind, I'd like to take you back with me. Just for a while. Back to a different world. A world of hot pavement, bright colors, mariachis in the street, and a little girl who wandered too far in a city she didn't understand. This is the story of the summer we went to Mexico. And how, for a moment, it almost changed everything. I was just a little thing back then, no more than 5 or 6, running around barefoot with a head full of curls and a wild imagination to match. We lived in a small house with a squeaky screen door and a front porch where Mama liked to snap peas in the afternoon. Lord, I can still hear that creak-slap sound of the screen springing shut behind me. Funny the things your mind holds onto. Our house sat on the edge of town, right past the general store and the Methodist church with the white steeple. It wasn't much, but Daddy built it with his own 2 hands, or so he always said, and Mama kept it shining like a new penny. We didn't have much money. Truth be told, we didn't have a pot to pee in most days. But we made do with what we had. That was just the way things were back then. Folks worked hard, and if they were lucky, they had a roof, a garden, and someone to hold their hand come nighttime. I shared a room with my big sister Lorraine, and let me tell you, She wasn't always thrilled about it. She was no spring chicken, already 12 and thinking she was too grown up for a tag-along sister. My brother Billy, he was older too, tough as nails, and always getting into something. But me, I was the baby. I spent most days tagging after Mama or sitting under the willow tree with my rag doll, dreaming up stories about faraway places I'd never seen. I believed in good people and that if you were kind, the world would be kind right back. I believed daddies never got tired and mamas never cried when nobody was looking. Saturdays were for sweeping the porch and washing our clothes out back in the tin tub. Mama would hum hymns while she scrubbed, and the sun would bleach our sheets whiter than snow. Sometimes when Daddy got paid, he'd come home with a bag of lemon drops or a bottle of cola, and we'd all share it out on the porch like it was a feast. Those little things meant the world to us. A nickel was something to be proud of. And time, well, time moved slow back then. Not like now. Back then, a summer afternoon could stretch on forever, with the sound of cicadas buzzing in the trees and the smell of cut grass in the air. I'd lie on my back and watch the clouds go by, imagining they were ships sailing across the sky. I thought the world was endless, and I couldn't wait to see all of it. That summer, Daddy said we were going on a trip. To Mexico, of all places. "We're gonna visit your Tío Manuel," he said, "and see where your grandma grew up." I didn't even know I had a Tío Manuel. But the idea of crossing a border, of leaving our little house and driving somewhere with new sounds and smells, it filled me with butterflies. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew it would be different. And different was exiting. I remember the night before we left, Mama packed us up in that big canvas suitcase with the leather straps. She folded my Sunday dress real careful and tucked in my rag doll like she was going to. Lorraine rolled her eyes, but Mama just smiled and said, "Let her dream. Baby, that's what little girls do." And I did. I dreamed all night of cities made of color, music floating in the streets, and warm air that smelled like oranges and cinnamon. Looking back, I see now how small I was, how much I didn't understand. But in my heart, I felt ready for something. I didn't know what exactly, just that the world was out there, waiting for me to find it. And oh, I found it all right, just not in the way I thought I would. I remember the moment we crossed that border like it was stitched into the lining of my soul. One minute we were on a long, dusty road, the kind that hummed under your feet and made your legs feel like jelly from all the bumping, and the next, everything just burst into color. Sounds got louder, the smells got sweeter and stranger, and the air itself felt like it was dancing to a rhythm I didn't know yet. I pressed my little hands to the glass of the Buick's window, and my breath left a foggy print I didn't even wipe away. I was too busy staring. Tijuana wasn't like anything I'd ever seen. It was loud, honey, real loud. The streets buzzed with people, cars honking, radios playing, music I didn't understand, but could feel all the way in my chest. There were stands selling bright dresses, toys made of tin, fried dough dipped in sugar, and something roasting that made my stomach growl like a bear. Lord have mercy, it was like walking into a dream where everything smelled like cinnamon and smoke and sun. Daddy pulled the car over near a little plaza with a fountain shaped like a lion, and he turned to Mama and said, "Well, here we are." And just like that, we were here. Mama clutched her purse to her chest, not out of fear, no, more like she was holding her breath, and Lorraine rolled her eyes and said, "It smells funny." Billy poked me in the ribs, just like always, and I let out a squeal that made a woman in a yellow shawl smile at me. She had gold hoops in her ears and a flower tucked in her hair. I'd never seen anyone look like that. I stared till Mama tugged my arm, and then we met him, Diego. Daddy's cousin, I think, or maybe a nephew. I never did keep the family tree straight. He was tall, with a smile that came easy and eyes that twinkled like he knew the end of the story before it even started. He wore a crisp white shirt and a hat that he tipped when he saw Mama. "Senora," he said, and Mama turned as red as her lipstick. "Welcome, familia," he said in English, and I liked the way he said it, warm and open, like we belonged already. But it wasn't Diego that stirred something in me that day. It was the market, the one he took us to right after we unpacked. He said he wanted to show us real Tijuana, not just the tourist parts. We walked through narrow alleys strung with paper flags, past women grinding corn on stones and old men plucking guitars like they had all the time in the world. I'd never seen so many colors. It was like the whole town was wearing Sunday best and dancing just because the sun was shining. That's when I saw her. A little girl, not much older than me, sitting behind a fruit stand with a baby on her hip. She wore a faded blue dress and no shoes. Her hair was in 2 long braids, and her eyes, Lord, her eyes were dark and deep like a well you could fall into. She stared at me like she knew something I didn't. And for just a second, the noise around us faded. Everything went still. I didn't know why, but my heart beat a little faster. I didn't feel scared. Not exactly. Just awake. I wanted to talk to her, but before I could, she turned and disappeared behind the stall. Just like that. Gone. And something about that moment stayed with me. I couldn't explain it then. Not with my little girl words. But I felt it, like a thread had been tied between us, thin as a hair, strong as steel. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it meant something. And maybe that was the first sign. That this place, with its smell of fire and fruit, its music and dust, wasn't just a stop on a trip. It was where something in me shifted, where I started to see the world not just as a place full of wonders, but a place full of mystery, where one wrong turn could change everything. It started out like any other hot afternoon that summer. The sun was high, burning through the top of my straw hat, and sweat trickled down the back of my neck. We were back at that same market, the one with the bright flags and the smell of grilled corn hanging heavy in the air. Mama told us to stay close. She always said that every time. "You hold your brother's hand," she told me, and I nodded like I meant it. But the thing is, I never did like holding Billy's hand. He always gripped too tight, like he was mad at the world. We were wandering past a table full of little wooden toys, tops, and carved donkeys, and tiny flutes that squeaked when you blew through when something caught my eye. It was a doll. Not just any doll, either. She had a painted face and dark braids just like that little girl I'd seen before. Her dress was stitched with red thread, real delicate-like. I don't know what came over me, but my feet started moving on their own. I just wanted to see her closer, just for a second. When I turned back around, they were gone. My family, just gone. At first, I didn't panic. I figured I'd just taken the wrong step. I spun around once, twice, my shoes scuffing the dirt, but all I saw was legs. So many legs, and voices, and colors. The whole market was moving, shifting like a river. I couldn't tell which way was which. My heart started thumping, so loud I thought for sure somebody else could hear it. "Daddy?" I called out. "Mama?" Nothing. Just the chatter of strangers and the shrill sound of someone haggling over a price. I was just a baby, really, but in that moment, I felt like the world had swallowed me up whole. I don't know how long I wondered. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe more. But it felt like forever. People brushed past me, never even looking down. I must have looked like any other child in that place, a face in the crowd. I kept thinking, they'll find me. They have to. Daddy's probably looking right now. But deep down, A little voice started whispering. What if they weren't looking? What if they'd just driven off without me? What if I stayed here forever? I hate to admit it, but I started crying. Thick, hot tears rolling down my cheeks, making my chin all sticky. I wiped them with the back of my hand, trying to be brave, but inside, I was scared out of my skin. I felt ashamed, too. Ashamed that I hadn't listened, that I'd let go of Billy's hand, that I'd wandered off for a silly doll. Then, out of nowhere, a hand touched my shoulder. I flinched, jumped really, but when I looked up, it was an old woman. Wrinkled face, soft eyes, skin like brown leather left out in the sun. She didn't say much, just looked at me, then pointed to a bench near the fountain. She led me there like a shepherd leads a lamb, sat me down, pulled a handkerchief from her sleeve and wiped my nose. Still didn't say a word. That silence, it calmed me, more than any words could have. She just sat beside me, letting me breathe, letting me be scared without making me feel bad for it. And then, like a miracle, I heard Mama's voice, crying out my name, frantic. Daddy not far behind, running. Billy trailing behind, looking like he might throw up. And oh, how Mama pulled me to her chest. She smelled like sweat and worry and love, all mixed together. I couldn't stop crying. Not even when she said, "You're safe now, baby. It's okay. You're safe." But inside, I didn't feel safe. Not really. I felt changed. Like a crack had opened up in the world, just a small one, but enough to see that life wasn't always soft and safe. That sometimes, even good girls could disappear. And the part that hurt the most? I'd done it to myself. Nobody snatched me. Nobody dragged me off. I just let go. That kind of guilt sticks to a child, and it stuck with me for years. I remember the heat. That's the first thing. It pressed down on my little shoulders like a wet wool blanket, heavy and breathless. The streets were humming again, vendors shouting, radios blaring, the clatter of carts on stone. But inside me, everything had gone quiet. Like someone had turned the world down to a whisper. That happens, you know, when something real big comes crashing down inside you. You stop hearing things the way you used to. After Mama found me and pulled me close, I thought that'd be the end of it. I figured I'd cry a little more, get scolded by Daddy, and then we'd go on like before. But I was wrong. Something shifted. I could feel it the moment we got back to the little house we were staying in. Daddy was quiet, too quiet. He wouldn't look at me. Just paced the floor with that hard line in his jaw he only got when he was mad or scared. And Mama, well, Mama held me close that first night, but the next day, her hands felt busier, tighter, like she was holding on to the rest of us so we wouldn't fall apart. That evening, I heard Em whispering, not yelling, but close to it, behind the bedroom door when they thought we were asleep. I heard my name in their voices over and over. She could have been taken. You know what happens to little girls down here. We never should have come. And then silence. The kind of silence that makes your stomach twist. And then Daddy said it. Quiet, like he was ashamed. We're going back. First thing tomorrow. My heart sank. I didn't even understand why. I just knew the trip was over. The music, the colors, the stories. Over. And it was my fault. The next morning we started packing. Mama moved like a ghost, folding clothes with her lips pressed tight. Lorraine was sulking, mad we were leaving early. Billy kicked rocks down the driveway. And me. I sat on the little step out back, watching ants crawl across the tile, feeling smaller than I ever had. That's when Diego came. He stood at the gate, hat in hand, sadness hanging off his shoulders. I heard him talking to Daddy real low. You don't have to go, he said. She's safe now. It was just a mistake. But Daddy wouldn't hear it. He shook his head like a man who'd already lost something important. No, he said, we don't belong here. Not with kids to think about. And I remember the way Diego looked at me. Not with blame. Not with pity. Just gentle. Like he knew what it meant for me to go home a little less whole than when I arrived. That night, as we crossed the border back into California, I pressed my face against the window again. Same road, same dust, but the girl staring out the glass wasn't the same. She didn't dream the same way. She didn't trust the world like she used to. And then, the clock in the gas station ticked over to 6:07 p.m. I saw it through the glass, just a plain OL wall clock behind the cashier. But I remember it like it stopped. That exact moment, time just held its breath. Because that's when I realized something no child should have to, that being loved doesn't always mean you're safe. And sometimes, bad things happen even when people are trying their best. I didn't cry. Not that time. I just folded my hands in my lap and watched the sun go down behind the hills. And somewhere deep inside, a part of me started growing up, faster than it should have. When we got back home, everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. The porch still creaked under Daddy's boots, and the willow tree still swayed out back like it always had. But the sun didn't seem quite as warm, and the sky, it looked a little duller, like someone had drawn a thin curtain across it while we were gone. And me, well, I wasn't the same girl who left. For a while, I didn't talk much. Not because anybody told me not to, Lord knows Mama tried to get me to open up, but because I didn't have the words for what I felt. I just knew something inside me had shifted. That easy part of childhood, the one that believes everything good lasts forever, it had slipped right through my fingers. And I didn't even know how to ask for it back. At night, I'd lie in bed beside Lorraine, listening to her soft snoring and watching the moonlight crawl across the ceiling. I'd think about that little girl in the market, the one with the baby on her hip and the eyes that saw through me. I'd wonder if she still sat behind that stall, waiting for the next face to walk by. I never saw her again, but somehow she stayed with me. Maybe 'cause she looked like she belonged there, and I never really did. At school, I didn't play much anymore. I was quieter. My teacher asked if I was feeling sick, but I just shook my head. I couldn't tell her that it wasn't my body that hurt. It was something deeper. Something I didn't have a name for yet. I'd sit and stare out the window, watching the trees sway, waiting for the bell to ring so I could go home and hide under Mama's apron like I used to when I was little. Only now, that didn't feel like enough either. Daddy never brought up the trip again. Not once. He went back to fixing cars and smoking on the porch at night, staring off into the dark like he was chasing something he'd never catch. Mama, she got busier, baking, cleaning, doing things twice that didn't need doing. I think she was trying to stitch the family back together, pretend like nothing had frayed. But it had. And even a mama's hands can't mend what's been torn on the inside. I missed the girl I'd been. The one who believed in mariachis and painted dolls and long roads with adventure at the end. She didn't come back from Mexico. Not really. What came back was quieter, more careful. I didn't reach out as much, didn't ask so many questions. And I sure as heck didn't let go of anyone's hand anymore. I guess I learned early what a lot of folks don't learn till later. The world don't owe you safety, even when you're small, even when you've done nothing wrong. And sometimes it ain't about what happens, it's about what almost did. That's what haunts you. The near miss, the breath you didn't get to take. But life, well, life keeps moving. That's the thing. It don't stop for sorrow. The days still roll on, the seasons change, and before you know it, you're older, and that scared little girl becomes a woman who knows how to carry her own weight. Doesn't mean the fear disappears. It just gets quieter, folds itself into the corners of your heart, and stays there, humming softly, like a lullaby with a sad ending. I never told anyone how I really felt after that trip. Not even Mama. I just tucked it away, like a secret I didn't know how to explain. I suppose that's why it's still with me, all these years later. Some memories don't fade, they just settle deeper. It happened on a Thursday. Funny how the ordinary days are the ones that sneak up on you with something important. I was sitting on the front steps, shelling peas for Mama, same as I'd done 100 times before, when I saw her. A girl from down the road, maybe a year younger than me, with scuffed up knees and tears streaking her dusty face. She was holding her dress up with one hand and trying to keep something from spilling out of her apron. Berries, I think. Looked like she'd fallen. Her mouth was twisted like she didn't know if she should cry harder or run off. And something in me moved. I didn't think. I just stood up, brushed off my skirt, and walked toward her. I knelt right there in the dirt and started helping her pick up the berries, one by one. They were squished and sticky, but we got most of 'em back in her apron. She looked at me real surprised and sniffled out a quiet thanks. I smiled, real gentle-like, and said, "It's all right. Happens to the best of us." And then I walked her back to her house, neither of us saying much. Didn't need to. It was a small thing, sure. Nothing heroic. But when I got back home and sat down with those peas again, I felt lighter. Just a little, like a window had opened a crack inside me and let in some fresh air. It didn't fix everything. It didn't bring back the colors. But it gave me a moment, just one, where I felt useful again. Connected. I think that's what started it. Not a miracle, not some grand realization. Just that one quiet act of kindness. The world felt a little less scary when I was doing something good, even if it was small. Especially if it was small. After that, I started looking around more, paying attention to people. The way old Mr. Carter from the corner store rubbed his knees when it rained. The way Miss Helen across the street always brought an extra plate to church potlucks, just in case. I started seeing how everyone, even the grown-ups, carried something heavy. And somehow, that made me feel less alone. Like maybe we were all just trying to walk straight with a limp inside. I still didn't talk much about Mexico, but I stopped hiding from it. I let it sit there with me sometimes, like a quiet guest I'd learned to live with. And as the months rolled on, I found other ways to feel steady again. Helping Mama with her canning, reading to Billy when he got sick one winter, giving Lorraine the last biscuit even when she didn't deserve it. And I started dreaming again. Not of faraway places now. Not yet. But of small things. Of someday growing a garden of my own. Of maybe teaching a class or taking care of animals. Something simple. Something honest. Hope don't always come knocking loud, you know. Sometimes it's a whisper. A soft nudge that says, "You're still here. You still matter." I didn't understand it then. Not fully, but I can look back now and see. That was my second chance. Not a do-over, just the chance to move forward with a little more care. A little more heart. So I held onto that spark. Tucked it away like a match in a storm. And I promised myself, no matter how small I felt, I'd keep walking. Even if it was slow. Even if the path wasn't clear. I'd keep walking. It took me years, more than I'd like to admit, to understand that carrying pain ain't the same as dealing with it. For the longest time, I just tucked that little girl away inside me, the one who got lost, the one who thought the world was hers, until it showed her different. I let her stay quiet. Let her sit in the corner of my memory, like a child who'd been scolded. I thought if I didn't talk about her, she'd disappear. But baby, pain don't vanish just 'cause you close the door on it. It waits. It waits till you're ready. I was in my 30s, married by then, with 2 babies of my own, when it finally came back full force. I was folding laundry, of all things. The radio was on low, and some Mexican ballad came drifting through the speakers, all soft guitar and aching voices. I froze. I swear my hands just stopped. My heart climbed into my throat. That music, it pulled the curtain back. And there she was, that little girl in the marketplace. That little me, terrified, ashamed, still holding that guilt like a stone in her tiny hands. And Lord, I cried, right there in the middle of the living room, surrounded by socks and towels and baby clothes. I cried like a child again. I think that was the first time I truly let myself feel it, not just the fear, but the sorrow, the shame, the weight of a memory I'd never made peace with. Later that night, after I put the kids to bed, I sat on the edge of my porch with a cup of tea and looked up at the stars. I remembered how the sky looked the night we crossed back into California, pale and soft, like it was trying to comfort me. And I whispered, I forgive you. Not to anyone else. Just to me. That little girl. I told her it wasn't her fault. She didn't know better. She was just curious, just full of wonder. And she deserved to feel safe again. A few weeks later, I found the rag doll I'd taken on that trip. Mama had kept it all those years in a cedar chest. Her dress was torn, one eye missing, but she was still there. I held her in my hands and I knew what I had to do. I took her down to the creek behind the house, the one with the old willow tree, and I said goodbye. I kissed her forehead, just like Mama used to kiss mine, and I set her in the water, watched her float away. It wasn't about letting go of her, it was about letting go of what I'd carried with her. The fear, the shame, the silence. That was the day I made a promise to myself. I would stop punishing the child I used to be. I would stop looking back with heavy eyes and start walking forward, not with regret, but with respect. For everything I'd survived, for everything I'd learned. I chose to live, not just go through the motions, not just smile when I didn't feel it. I chose to really live with softness, with kindness, and most of all, with forgiveness. I didn't need to be fixed. I just needed to be heard. And I finally gave that girl inside me a voice. You know, we don't always get big endings. No fireworks. No grand applause. Sometimes it's just a quiet moment by a creek, a rag doll floating away, and a heart finally learning how to rest. And that, to me, is enough. You know, people always talk about the big moments, graduations, weddings, babies being born, like those are the ones that shape who you are. And maybe they do in some ways. But I've come to believe it's the quiet moments, the ones nobody sees, that really do the molding. The days when you feel lost and don't know how to say it out loud. The nights when you forgive someone who'll never say sorry. The mornings when you get up and keep going, even though nothing inside you wants to move. That trip to Tijuana, well, it was just a few days. But it's lived with me my whole life. Not because it was dramatic or tragic, though Lord knows it scared me more than anything I'd ever known. No, it stayed with me because of what it taught me. Not right away. Not when I was 5 or even 15. But slowly, over time, like a whisper that kept getting clearer with every year that passed. I learned that you can lose something precious, your sense of safety, your wonder, your trust, and still be okay. Maybe not the same. Maybe not whole in the way you were before. But okay. And sometimes okay is enough. I learned that fear don't make you weak. It just means you're paying attention. And you don't have to beat it, you just have to walk beside it. Hold its hand if you have to. Just don't let it steer. And I learned, more than anything, that forgiveness is something you give yourself first. Not for being wrong, but for being human. For getting scared. For making a mistake. For not knowing better until you did. These days, when I sit with my grandbabies and they tell me their little worries, school, friends, not being liked, I don't rush to fix it. I just listen. And sometimes, when the time feels right, I tell Em about that summer. About the doll. The market. The fear. But I don't tell it like a warning. I tell it like a path. A crooked one, sure, but one that brought me right here. And baby, if I made it, they can too. Life don't come with signs or instructions. It just hands you moments, some sweet, some sharp, and you get to decide what you'll make of them. You can shut down, or you can open up. You can stay hurt, or you can heal. I chose the latter, not because I had to, but because I was tired of being stuck in a moment that already passed. And maybe that's what I want to tell you now, whoever you are listening. Maybe you've got something you've carried too long. Something you don't talk about, even to yourself. Maybe it ain't some grand trauma. Maybe it's just a moment that twisted you up inside and never quite let go. Well, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to open that old chest, dust off the thing you buried, and decide it doesn't get to own you anymore. I'm not saying it'll be easy. Land's sakes, no. But I'll tell you what, it's worth it. Every tear, every breath, every slow step toward peace. It's worth it. And maybe, just maybe, it's your turn now. Maybe it's time to stop waiting for life to feel fair and start living like it already is. Not perfect, but yours. Well, now, you've sat with me this long. Listen to all my rambling and remembering. And I thank you for that, truly. It means more than you know. Just having someone who'll sit still long enough to hear a heart unfold. You know this story, it ain't really about Mexico. Not just about getting lost, or being scared, or coming home changed. It's about the little things we carry, sometimes our whole lives, without even knowing how heavy they are. It's about the quiet battles we fight in the dark, the ones nobody sees, but that shape who we are just the same. I told you all this not because I think my life is special. Lord knows I've lived a plain life by most reckonings. I didn't climb mountains or cure diseases, but I felt things, deep things, and I learned how to live with what life handed me, without letting it turn me bitter. That, I think, is its own kind of bravery. You might be sitting there thinking, that's just an old woman's tale. And maybe it is. But I've lived long enough to know that everybody's got a market they got lost in. A moment that scared them more than they'd ever admit. A piece of themselves they wish they could go back and protect. Or forgive. So let me ask you something now, sweet one. What is your story? What have you tucked away in a drawer of your memory, hoping time would make it disappear? What old guilt? What soft hurt? What quiet regret have you been carrying in your pocket like a stone? And more importantly, what would happen if you let it go? I don't need to know the details. I just hope you know this. You don't have to stay stuck in the place where the pain found you. You're allowed to grow past it, to outlive it, to take its weight and shape it into something softer, gentler. Like I did, like we all try to. Sometimes I sit on my porch, looking out at the same willow tree I used to hide under as a girl. The wind still dances through its branches, same as it always did. And I wonder, if that little girl I was could see me now, sitting here with my gray hair and laugh lines, would she know we made it? Would she understand the long road it took to get here? And sometimes when the sun's just right and the breeze is humming like an old lullaby, I swear I hear her laugh. Light and wild, like it used to be. And I smile, because she's still with me. Not lost. just changed. So maybe this story wasn't just mine after all. Maybe it's a little bit yours too. Maybe we all walk around with pieces of each other, even when we don't realize it. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you catch a scent, or hear a melody, or hold something worn and soft from your childhood, maybe it'll bring you back to a place you didn't even know needed healing. I guess what I'm really trying to say is this: it's never too late. Not to forgive, not to begin again, not to find a little softness in this hard old world. And tell me, just between us, do you think that if love is real, it always finds its way back? Because sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see her, that little girl in the market. And sometimes, it feels like she remembers me too.